Welcome to the Soul Shed. Here, simple stories open ancient doors. I am Eden Lin, light-bearer, keeper of stories, watcher of the inner flame. For those who feel lost, walk with me. Your soul already knows the way. The Owl in the Fountain, a Soul Shed story. The first thing people noticed wasn't the owl. It was the fountain. It stood in the middle of an old courtyard, hidden behind iron gates and ivy-covered walls, like it had been forgotten by the world. The stone was cracked, the carvings worn down by time, and moss clung to the edges like the earth was slowly reclaiming it. Yet somehow, the water still ran. Not a gentle trickle either. It poured from the fountain's mouth like it had something urgent to say, and at the top, carved into the stone, half eroded but still readable, were the words, "There are few rules to follow." Nobody knew who carved them. Nobody knew why. But the fountain was always there, always running, always waiting, like a quiet teacher, like a witness. And then one night, the owl appeared. It wasn't perched on a tree branch like owls were supposed to be. It wasn't flying silently through the darkness like the world expected. No, it sat inside the fountain, right in the water. Still, heavy, unmoving, as if it had chosen to drown but decided at the last second it wasn't done living. The owl's feathers were soaked, but it didn't shiver. Its eyes were bright amber, almost glowing, like lanterns in a storm, and it stared forward like it wasn't looking at the world. It was looking through it. People who passed the courtyard began to notice it. At first, they laughed. What kind of owl sits in water? That's not normal. Maybe it's sick. Maybe it's dying. Some even tried to scare it away, but the owl didn't move. It didn't flinch. It didn't fight. It just sat there in the falling water, as if the fountain was washing something invisible from its body. And then, one evening a man arrived. Not a tourist, not a curious onlooker. He didn't come because he heard rumors. He came because his heart had reached a place where it couldn't pretend anymore. His name didn't matter. Not because he wasn't important, but because he represented every soul who had ever carried too much. He walked into the courtyard like someone entering a church after years of being away. Not sure if he belonged there. Not sure if he deserved peace. He stood before the fountain and stared at the owl, and for a long moment, neither of them moved. The water ran between them like time itself. Then the man sat down on the cold stone edge, and without thinking, he whispered, "Why are you sitting in that?" The owl blinked slowly. Its eyes didn't soften, but they didn't harden either. They just remained, like they had seen everything. The man sighed. He rubbed his hands together like he was trying to warm up a part of himself that hadn't felt warmth in years. "I'm not asking as a joke," he said quietly. "I mean it." The owl didn't answer, but the man continued anyway, as if the silence was permission. "I feel like that," he admitted. "Like I'm sitting in something I can't escape." His voice cracked slightly, but he tried to hold it together. "I've been trying to fix myself," he said. "I've been trying to become better, stronger, more spiritual, more awake." He looked up at the carved words on the fountain. "There are few rules to follow." He laughed under his breath. "But nobody tells you the rules, do they?" The owl remained still. And for the first time, the man noticed something strange. The owl's feathers weren't just wet. They looked like they had been wet for a long time, as if it had been there for days, maybe weeks, maybe longer. And yet, the owl didn't look weak. It looked tired, but not broken. It looked like something that had survived what should have ended it. The man leaned forward. "I'm tired too," he said softly. "I'm tired of pretending I'm fine." His eyes stung, and he didn't know why. He hadn't cried in a long time. Not properly. Not honestly. He had trained himself to swallow everything. Like a man taught to be tough. Like a soul taught to be silent. But the owl didn't swallow anything. It just sat in the water openly, unashamed. The man's throat tightened. "You know what's crazy?" he said. "I always thought wisdom meant being calm." He looked at the owl again. "But you're not calm." He paused. "You're still?" He said it like it was a revelation. Stillness wasn't peace. Stillness was survival. Stillness was the last thing you do when you've fought too hard and you've run out of energy. Stillness was what happens when the storm has beaten you down, but it hasn't taken your soul. The man stared at the owl and suddenly felt like he was looking at his own reflection, not physically, but spiritually. He swallowed. "I feel like I've been through 1,000 storms," he whispered, "and everyone keeps telling me to move on." His hands trembled slightly. "They say, just let it go. Just forgive. Just forget. Just be grateful." His voice became bitter, as if I can just switch it off. He shook his head. "But the truth is," he stared at the water pouring down over the owl's head. "The truth is I'm still sitting in it." And then his voice broke completely, and I don't know how to get out. The courtyard was silent except for the sound of water. The owl blinked again, and then it moved. Not much, just enough to shift its body slightly, as if adjusting its weight. But it was the first movement anyone had seen, and the man froze. His heart thumped in his chest, because somehow that tiny movement felt like an answer, like the owl was saying, "You don't get out until you've been washed clean." The man stared harder. The owl's eyes were not judging him. They weren't mocking him. They weren't even pitying him. They were simply watching him the way the sky watches the earth, the way God watches a person in pain, not rushing them, not saving them too quickly, but letting them learn what they must learn. The man exhaled slowly, and then he said something he'd never said out loud before. "I'm afraid," he admitted. The words fell into the fountain's sound, like stones dropping into deep water. "I'm afraid that if I stop struggling, I'll disappear." He looked down. "I've spent my whole life fighting, fixing, running, achieving, proving, surviving." He pressed his palm to his chest. "And I don't know who I am without the struggle." His eyes watered. "And I'm terrified that the moment I sit still, I'll feel everything." He laughed again, but it wasn't humor. It was grief wearing a mask. "And maybe I'm not strong enough to feel everything." The owl's eyes didn't change, but something about them made the man feel like he had been heard, like his pain had finally reached something that didn't run away from it. And that's when he noticed something else. The water pouring down from the fountain wasn't hitting the owl like punishment. It was hitting it like a blessing, like rain in the desert, like baptism. The owl wasn't trapped. The owl had chosen to be there. Not because it loved suffering, but because it understood something humans often don't. That pain isn't always an enemy. Sometimes, pain is the place you go to be transformed. The man sat back, stunned. He looked at the owl and whispered, "You're not drowning." His voice shook. "You're cleansing." The owl's head tilted slightly, and in that small movement, the man felt something shift inside him. Not a miracle, not a sudden happiness, but something deeper, something quieter. Acceptance. He sat there for a long time, long enough for the sky to darken further, long enough for the air to turn colder, long enough for his thoughts to stop racing. And when the noise inside him finally faded, he realized something he hadn't noticed in years. His whole life, he had been trying to escape himself. He had been trying to outrun his own wounds. But wounds don't disappear when you run. They just follow you silently. And the moment you stop, they catch up. The man stared at the owl and felt the first true tears slide down his face. Not dramatic, not loud, just real. The kind of tears that don't ask permission. The kind of tears that say, "I've been holding this too long." He wiped his cheek and whispered, "I don't know what to do." And for the first time, he didn't say it like a victim. He said it like a child, like someone finally admitting they were human. He looked at the owl again, and suddenly, the carved words above the fountain felt different. There are few rules to follow. He used to think it meant freedom. But now, he thought it meant something else. He realized life was never meant to be a perfect performance. Life was never meant to be controlled. There weren't many rules because the soul isn't a machine. The soul is a living thing, a wild thing, a fragile thing, and it doesn't heal by force, it heals by truth. The man inhaled deeply, and he spoke again, but this time his voice was softer. "I've been trying to become wise," he said, "but maybe wisdom isn't learning more." He looked at the owl. Maybe wisdom is surviving long enough to stop lying. The owl's gaze remained steady. The man's shoulders dropped. He felt heavy, but not hopeless. And in that heaviness, he felt something he hadn't felt in years. Grounded. He sat there and remembered all the times he had pushed himself past his limits. All the times he had ignored his body, ignored his mind, ignored his spirit, because he thought stopping meant weakness, because he thought rest meant failure, because he thought stillness meant giving up. But the owl was showing him something sacred. Stillness wasn't surrender to death. Stillness was surrender to truth. The man whispered, "I think I've been afraid of silence." He looked around the courtyard. No voices, no distractions, no music, no scrolling, no escaping. Just water, just stone, just darkness, just him. And the owl. He swallowed. "I think I've been afraid of hearing myself." He paused. "And I think I've been afraid that God would hear me too." He let the words hang there. And suddenly he realized how ridiculous it was. God already heard him. God had always heard him. Even when he pretended. Even when he ran. Even when he numbed himself. Even when he tried to be someone else. The owl blinked again, and the man felt something in his chest loosen. Not because he had solved his life, but because he had stopped fighting the truth. He looked into the owl's eyes and whispered, "You're not sitting in water. You're sitting in your own cleansing." His voice became stronger, and maybe I have to do the same. He stood slowly. His legs were stiff, but his heart felt different. Not healed, but honest. He stepped closer to the fountain. The water mist touched his face. Cold, sharp, real. He stared at the owl and said, "I've been trying to avoid pain. But pain is part of the path," he nodded. "And maybe the only way forward is through." Then he smiled sadly. "I don't want to be a motivational story," he whispered. "I don't want to pretend everything's beautiful." He looked down. "I just want to be real." And that's when it happened. The owl rose. Not dramatically, not like a movie. It simply stood up. Water poured off its feathers like the shedding of an old self. It spread its wings slightly. Not to fly yet, just to remind the world, I still have power. The man held his breath. The owl stepped forward to the edge of the fountain, and the man noticed something heartbreaking. The owl had scars, tiny marks, worn patches of feather, signs of battles no one had seen, and yet it was alive. The owl looked at the man one last time, and in its eyes the man saw something that almost shattered him. A message without words, a truth without language. You will survive this too. Then the owl opened its wings fully, and for the first time the man realized how large it was, how strong, how ancient, how sacred. The owl lifted off, slowly, silently, and it vanished into the night sky. The man stood there, alone, staring into the fountain. The water kept running. The words above remained. There are few rules to follow. But now he understood. The rules weren't instructions, they were reminders that life is not about perfection. Life is not about becoming untouchable. Life is not about escaping the storm. Life is about learning how to sit in it without losing yourself. He sat down again on the stone edge, and he whispered something that felt like prayer. I don't need to be fearless. He wiped his face. I just need to be honest. He looked into the water. His reflection stared back, and for the first time in yours, he didn't hate what he saw. He saw someone tired, someone wounded, someone still learning, someone still healing, someone still alive. And the fountain continued to pour like it was washing the world clean, and the man realized the life lesson that would stay with him forever. Sometimes the most spiritual thing you can do is stop running. Sit down at the water. Let it hurt. Let it cleanse you. And let the old version of you dissolve. Because wisdom isn't being happy all the time. Wisdom is knowing that you can feel pain and still remain. Stillness is not weakness. Stillness is strength. And healing doesn't always look like rising. Sometimes healing looks like sitting in the fountain while the world pours over you until your soul remembers what it was always meant to become. And somewhere in the darkness, the owl watched from a distant tree, not as a judge, not as a savior, but as a witness, as if to say, "You're still here. That means the story isn't over." Thank you for listening to The Soul Shed. Until next time, take care of your light. And when it feels dim, come back. We'll be here. Because the soul remembers what the mind forgets.